My wife went out partying without me, despite my clear request for her not to go. This decision led to a painful discovery. I later found out that she had cheated on me. I recently stumbled upon this forum while seeking support during this difficult time. A little context about my situation: I am a 30-year-old man, and my wife is 25. We have been married for 3 years and have been together for nearly 6 years in total. We do not have any children, and we lack significant assets. In fact, we carry more debt than we have cash in our checking account. We rent our home, and I am the primary income earner, bringing in about $4,000 a month, while she nets around $1,500. I work hard to provide for her and ensure she has the lifestyle she is accustomed to, and now I find myself dealing with this unimaginable betrayal. My work environment is quite tight-knit. A coworker, who I have known for almost 3 years, invited me to join a recreational soccer league, which I have been a part of for the last 2 years. My wife would consistently attend my soccer games, and I initially took this as a sign of her support. However, a part of me wondered if her attendance was more about the alcohol that often accompanied these events. While I usually kept my drinking light during the games, she would often indulge and become quite loose and carefree, especially during the ride home after the games. Sometimes, after the matches, a group of players would gather at various locations to socialize into the night, including my house or local bars and pizza joints. A couple of weeks ago, a gathering was planned at one of the players' homes, which was located in a city that was a distance away. After the game, I informed everyone that my wife and I wouldn't be able to join them because I had to work early in the morning. On the way home, however, my wife texted one of the guys I thought of as a friend, asking if he could give her a ride to the party. During the drive, she asked me if she could go, and I firmly told her no. I expressed my desire to spend the evening with her since I had to work the next day. Instead of taking my feelings into account, she responded with an angry silence, a classic treatment that indicated I had upset her. When we arrived home, I noticed a car pull up in front of our house. To my shock, it was my buddy who had shown up to pick her up. She had decided to disregard my feelings and make the choice to attend the party anyway. Anger surged through me, and I approached my friend's car, insisting that he leave, as I was not okay with this situation. In a troubling turn of events, my wife got out of my car and climbed into his. They drove away, leaving me in a state of rage and disbelief. In my fury, I plugged in the old iPad I had bought for my wife a few years prior. Although it was outdated, I knew it was still connected to her messaging and social media accounts. I found myself anxiously waiting up for her, checking the notifications, and trying to stay awake late into the night. I finally fell asleep around 3 a.m. only to wake the next morning to find her in our bed. I had no idea when she had come home, but her presence was a reminder of the previous night's events. I got ready for work without waking her or giving her a goodbye kiss, which was an unusual occurrence in our marriage. I wanted her to know just how upset I was. Before leaving, I took the iPad and shoved it into my briefcase. Once at work, after attending a meeting and handling a few phone calls, I pulled the iPad out. Just as I was about to start working, a notification popped up on the screen: "Buddy is typing." My heart raced as I opened the messaging app and was immediately confronted with a horrifying exchange of texts. The messages were supposed to self-destruct, but due to an outdated version of the app, I was able to view their conversation in real time. They were chatting about their night, with my wife's buddy making crude references to their physical intimacy. I felt my world crashing down around me. As I continued reading, it only got worse. I watched in disbelief as my wife instructed this man to send her a video of him performing a crude act, which he readily obliged. I was overwhelmed with nausea, and the weight of what I had just witnessed caused my stomach to turn. I ran out of my office and into the restroom, where I vomited uncontrollably. Shaking with anger and sorrow, I requested permission to leave work early, taking several hours to collect myself and calm down. I feared that I might hurt someone or myself in my state of turmoil. Upon returning home, I found her still asleep on the bed, as if nothing had happened. I set my things down quietly and asked her to join me downstairs. Once we were seated across from each other, I demanded she recount in detail everything that had taken place the previous night. As she spoke, her account was vague, focusing primarily on drinking and playing pool, with any involvement of more intimate activities omitted from her narrative. The situation had started simply enough, with just drinks, playing pool, and casual conversations. That was the extent of it. Then, out of curiosity, I asked her when she had last spoken with Buddy. She replied that she had exchanged some messages with him that morning, but there was nothing significant in those discussions. At that moment, I felt compelled to reveal a shocking truth. Would your story change if you knew I watched the entire conversation you had with him this morning? The impact of my words hit her hard, causing her to burst into tears. The first thing she asked, in a trembling voice, was whether I was leaving her. It was then that she started to confess. She admitted that her memory was hazy, but she had indeed engaged in intimate relations with Buddy and another teammate the previous night. She couldn't recall if there were others involved, but she knew those two for sure. The revelation filled me with disgust. I asked her if this was the first time such an incident had occurred, and to my shock, she admitted that there had been other occasions. One instance was particularly painful. She admitted it had happened in our home while I was asleep upstairs. At that moment, I felt numb, overwhelmed by the betrayal. I helped her pack a bag, and she left to stay with family. As she departed, she implored me not to tell anyone about what had happened. Alone with my thoughts, I was now 2 weeks beyond that devastating day, often referred to as D-Day, with no clear direction on what to do next. I struggled to find comfort in the fact that my experience might not be the worst, but it felt difficult to imagine a more painful betrayal than discovering that my wife had participated in something akin to a gangbang with people I had welcomed into our home. Now, she was trying to place the blame on alcohol consumption, promising that she would start attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and wanted to pursue couples therapy. She expressed a desire for us to emerge from this chaos together, but I found it hard to believe that any reconciliation was possible. Despite this, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions, including guilt. I couldn't understand why I felt that way. I had a meeting scheduled with an attorney the next day, and I hoped I was making the right choice, regardless of how broken she appeared to be over her alcoholism and her commitment to working things out. The thought of speaking with her made my stomach turn, as images flooded my mind that I found deeply disturbing. Trust had been shattered, and I was left feeling repulsed by her repeated actions. I knew I deserved much better than the treatment I had received. Though I recognized my own imperfections, I was left questioning why I felt such guilt about the situation when I had done nothing wrong. I couldn't help but wonder if reconciliation was even feasible under these circumstances. I was not the villain in this story, was I? Any support or words of wisdom from others who had experienced similar turmoil would be greatly appreciated. As I put my feelings into words, it became painfully clear how blindsided I felt, making it difficult to stop caring about someone who had deeply hurt me. As an update, I would like to express my gratitude for all the advice, concern, and positivity I have received from those who have reached out to me. It has now been nearly a month since I first shared my experience, and many people have kindly checked in to see how I've been doing. Sadly, the situation has devolved from tragic to unbelievably horrific. No word seems adequate to capture the depths of my feelings. I apologize in advance for what I know will be a lengthy update, but it is the only way to convey the full scope of my emotional devastation. Days after my initial post, I took some of the advice given in scheduled meetings with several attorneys, as well as a session with a legal document preparation specialist, to keep my options open. My wife was completely unaware of these meetings. We had refrained from direct communication for a few days, but she later insisted that this time she was genuinely committed to working on our relationship by going to see a marriage therapist, something I had suggested for months prior to D-Day. Although I played along, I knew in my heart what choice I would ultimately make. She did manage to secure an appointment with a therapist, but it would take about a week and a half for us to get in. During that time, I found myself obsessively monitoring her digital activities through her iPad. I scrutinized every message and constantly checked her social media accounts, including Facebook and Snapchat. After a week and a half of watching her every move, I was left with no new insights or revelations about our situation. I found myself in a situation where I had no more evidence to support my feelings, yet there was a part of me that wondered if she was genuinely feeling remorseful. When the time came for us to meet with the therapist, he invited us to sit down together. He asked us to explain why we were there. I encouraged her to tell her side of the story in her own words. While I noticed she left out some important details, most of what needed to be said was laid out in front of us. After hearing everything, the therapist turned to me and asked how I felt about the trust one had in her and how this impacted my feelings about our marriage. In that moment, I shook my head in disbelief, overwhelmed by shock. Instead of directly answering his question, I felt compelled to express my thoughts. I said that if I didn't say it out loud right then and there, I might never find the courage to do so. I realized that for me, there was no return from this point. The marriage, as I once knew it, was over. The vows we took had been broken, and my trust had been completely shattered. The only logical step I could see was to file for a divorce. As I spoke those words, a wave of discomfort washed over me, but I also felt a sense of relief for finally voicing my feelings. She responded with intense emotional distress, bursting into tears. I continued, expressing my uncertainty about what could possibly be salvaged from our relationship. I reiterated that the marriage was indeed over and that I had meant every word I spoke at our wedding. I understood that I was not being true to myself if I didn't acknowledge that this bond was broken beyond repair. In that moment, openly declaring my feelings in front of her and the therapist felt like a small weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The rest of the therapy session was largely focused on the therapist helping her understand why my feelings were valid, given the circumstances. He worked to calm her down and to reassure her. In my opinion, the session couldn't have gone any better under the circumstances. The therapist suggested that rather than continuing our sessions as a couple, it might be beneficial for us to meet separately first. His intention was to help each of us as individuals before possibly discussing the idea of reconciliation in the future. I want to be clear, at this moment, I had no interest in reconciliation whatsoever. However, I also recognized that individual therapy might be beneficial for me. At this point, I was fully aware that I was about to embark on a legal journey that could turn extremely unpleasant if not handled carefully. Considering I was the main provider in a no-fault state, the potential legal ramifications weighed heavily on my mind. I had documented the entire legal process, but I was hesitant to share it online until everything was finalized, as it seemed too risky. The most important takeaway regarding the legal proceedings was that I needed to maintain an amicable atmosphere for the time being. Fast forward to about a week and a half later, we had each attended at least one individual therapy session. Her narrative to her family was that we were ending the marriage due to the broken vows, but that we were both focusing on healing ourselves. She continued staying with her family, while I found myself preoccupied with an obsessive need to monitor her online presence for any indication that she might still be engaging in the same troubling behaviors. Even if no one else had nudged me in this direction, I would have been searching anyway. One night, I realized there was an area I had not yet investigated, the App Store. I navigated to the app download history linked to our iCloud account and discovered that almost 2 weeks prior, she had downloaded a secret texting app onto her phone. My stomach dropped as the realization hit me. In a single moment, I understood that she had gone out of her way to hide her communications from me, especially knowing that I had the iPad she insisted I keep to help rebuild trust. Little did she know, any app downloaded on her iCloud account would be visible on any connected device. The need to uncover what was happening within that app overwhelmed me. I acted without fully processing my actions. I downloaded the app onto her iPad and attempted to log in using a few of her most common passwords. To my shock, I unlocked the truth. It wasn't just that she had been using the app to message someone, she had been actively communicating with someone else since our first therapy session, and they had even been intimate during moments when she knew I would be away. The weight of this knowledge felt unbearable as I stood on the precipice of understanding the reality of our fractured relationship. She was aware that I would be away from the area, and that was when everything hit me. I was overwhelmed with emotions. At 3 o'clock in the morning on a weeknight, I found myself in the restroom, feeling sick to my stomach. I cried as I began grabbing any prescription-strength medications I could find. My hands were full of various pills, an overflowing handful that I knew could easily end my life. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I sobbed, feeling like I was on the brink of giving up. In a moment of desperation, I picked up my phone to call my mom. No answer. I tried my dad, again, nothing. Then I called my sister. She answered, and through my violent tears, I revealed to her what I had just discovered. She could sense my fragile state, how close I was to losing control. While I didn't tell her about the pills in my hand, she insisted on keeping me on the phone late into the night until I started to calm down. After about an hour of talking, I finally felt a sense of numbness return to me. I hung up the phone, pushed myself back into the bathroom, and poured the pills back into one of their bottles. I washed my hands as if trying to cleanse away the pain before heading back to bed, attempting to get at least a couple of hours of sleep. But sleep eluded me. As the hours crawled by, I realized I had to go to work. I needed to escape that house, that moment, anything that reminded me of my despair. As I got dressed, I threw the bottle of pills into my briefcase along with my iPad. Once I arrived at the office, I immediately went to my most trusted coworker and asked him to lock the items away in his desk. I wanted them out of my reach, never to return. Without asking questions, he obliged and gave me an understanding pat on the shoulder as I walked away. Now, I had accomplished what I set out to do. I had undeniable proof that not only was my wife cheating on me, but she was also a skilled liar. For days, I wrestled with what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to expose her to everyone, family, friends, anyone who would listen, but I held back. I was already in the process of ending our marriage, but there was still a delicate window of time. If I acted hastily, she might retaliate and make things more difficult. As days went by, with her persistent texts and calls going unanswered, she finally showed up at my house to check on me. During that encounter, I felt like I was about to explode with emotion. I kept my responses vague and appeared indifferent, not revealing the turmoil inside. It wasn't until she lost her temper, yelling at me for acting strangely, that I decided to confront her. I asked her point blank if she had any contact with Buddy since that night. Her response was a firm no. She claimed she had blocked him on everything. I pressed again, wanting to be sure. She insisted, declaring that he was gross and that she could never betray me like that. Then, I made my move. I revealed the evidence I had, the app on my phone showing their conversations and the plans they had made to sneak around based on my daily schedule. That moment shattered her. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing and begging for something I couldn't identify. I maintained a calm demeanor as I explained the terms. I would not tell anyone about her deceit, but in return, she would not contest anything in the divorce proceedings. I was determined to be fair, even though I felt I shouldn't have to be. I warned her she would be served with the divorce papers, and I made it clear that any resistance would force me to reveal the truth to others. She left, and 2 days later, the papers were served. Since that day, I have kept my promise, sharing the details with no one outside my immediate family. Yet, I know through Find My iPhone that she has been visiting Buddy every single night at his house, which he shares with his mother. Her family believes she is attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, completely unaware of the reality of her actions. She is attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings every single night, but my screenshots showing her location during these supposed meetings tell a different story. It's baffling to me that she hasn't changed her iCloud password. I have no clear reason for why I keep gathering this evidence, but I find myself doing it anyway. Right now, I'm struggling with the anxiety of waiting for this period to pass until she has the right to contest me in court. Meanwhile, her family believes she is on the right path, but the reality couldn't be more different. In truth, she is deceiving every one of them. What hurts me the most is the unfairness of it all. She gets to spend time with her family, pretending that everything is going smoothly, while every night she slips away to be with him. Then, she returns home under the cover of darkness, putting on a front as if nothing is amiss. Meanwhile, I go to work every day and return to an empty house that feels haunted by the memories of what once was, experiencing the deep sense of loneliness in every aspect of my life. Although I have moved past thoughts of self-harm, these days are still profoundly dark. I'm focusing on taking life 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, until I reach a moment where I can find reassurance in knowing I can escape this nightmare without my finances being completely wrecked. That day will come when I can finally leave her behind completely. What lies ahead for me after that point is uncertain, but for now, my focus is on just surviving until that moment arrives. Thank you for reading and for the support, wisdom, and strength you have all shared with me. In a time when I feel entirely cut off from the world, this community has become my one outlet. Although I may not know anything personal about each of you, I trust you more than I trust my wife without any hesitation. This update is my 3rd post here, and I hope it will be my last. I cannot express how grateful I am for the immense support and advice I received, which helped me navigate some of the darkest moments of my life. I waited until now to share an update because, after a long and drawn-out process, my divorce is finally official. There's no longer a need to stay hidden, having endured that lengthy 6 months and 1 day cooling-off period to see if my ex-wife would get her act together without me knowing. It's over. I have gone completely no contact, and at last, I feel like I can begin to move forward with my life. Many people followed my previous posts, which were filled with turmoil and chaos, and I should have anticipated that the remaining cooling-off period would be equally challenging. Thus, I want to share what has happened since my last message. What I didn't disclose in my last post, which was 6 weeks after D-Day, is that I had already filed for divorce with the county. Following the advice of many kind users here, I returned the iPad to her and cut off any links to devices or social media accounts that would enable me to obsess over tracking her whereabouts or whom she was with. I had a clear understanding of what I wanted out of this divorce process, and while my approach may have caused me more emotional pain in the long run, it didn't wreak havoc on my finances as much as it could have. This entire ordeal unfolded at an agonizingly slow pace, but it made sense. After realizing that this woman could never be trusted again, I understood I needed to cut ties completely. I was not going to support her financially for half the length of our marriage, which would have meant paying around $2,000 each month in spousal support. We don't even have children, and in my state, being the breadwinner would typically mean I'd owe her something. But no way was I going to give her anything for what she has done to me. Fueled by anger, I took time to think and developed a plan to swiftly exit this marriage. Looking back, I'm not particularly proud of the tactics I employed during my divorce journey. However, I recognize that they ultimately worked out in my favor. Still, I feel that my integrity and moral standing may have taken a hit because of the choices I made. I have to admit that I feel my integrity and moral standing may have taken a hit. This is a matter of perspective, of course. From my viewpoint, my own actions were nothing more than molehills when compared to the mountains of mistrust, hurt, and anguish that she brought into my life. Around the same time as my last post, I had already prepared the divorce papers and submitted them to the county, but I was still waiting for confirmation. I chose to keep this information from my wife, who was living with her family at that time. Ever since I made the tough decision to ask her to leave, she had never been welcomed back into our home. I tried several times to arrange meetings where we could talk. My intention was to convince her that, somehow, I still had an interest in salvaging our relationship. However, that was a complete lie. During these conversations, I made it clear that, in my mind, our marriage was over. The vows we took had been broken, and if we truly wanted to start over, it would require us to mutually end our marriage first. Then, we could begin to date each other again, effectively courting one another in an effort to build a new and stronger relationship. Even now, as I write this, I struggle with a feeling of disgust. It's hard to believe that she actually bought into this idea. I genuinely wanted to make the process as smooth and painless as possible for her. My objective was to expedite everything and keep the process private so that we could both get through this transitional phase and focus on what came next. A perfect example of this was how I had her served with the divorce papers. I arranged for a mutual friend to come to my house, the house we had once shared, and act as a third party during the handoff of the documents. In this setup, she signed the papers without even taking a moment to look through them. I doubt she truly examined the details of those legal forms because I had painted a very appealing picture for myself, one that portrayed me as wanting to avoid any spousal support beyond splitting what we had in our bank account at the time. This avoidance of spousal support was my primary concern. For the first few months, I attempted to create distance between us, trying to give myself enough time to think without seeing her too often. We met roughly twice a month for dinner or casual discussions in public places, where I acted as if I cared. These meetings were intentionally in public, ensuring she could never claim that I was trying to act inappropriately. I maintained the appearance of someone who was working through emotions and striving to forgive her so that we could reconcile, when, in reality, I had no intention of doing so. By keeping her in this state, I managed to smoothly remove her from my bank accounts with her cooperation, got her removed from the lease, and even arranged for all of her belongings to be moved out into a storage unit. I convinced her that once all of her things were out of the house, it would help me feel less haunted as I began to heal. Lying to her and keeping her in a compliant state made all the challenging aspects of the separation remarkably easy. She genuinely believed she was doing the right thing for both of us. This strategy carried me through approximately 4 of the 6 months I needed to reach the end of this difficult journey. It wasn't until about the 4th month that I received a text from a family member she was living with, asking if we were still trying to work things out. This family member was aware of the truth of our situation, including her connection with another man. In order to keep up the facade of reconciliation, I responded with a simple, "Yes, why?" Almost immediately, I received a picture of my wife having dinner with this man at a restaurant in a city not far from us, along with a follow-up text saying, "This is happening right now." It turned out that this family member was in the area for drinks after work and had spotted them together. This was the moment when I lost my composure. Overwhelmed by my emotions, I sent a text to my wife right then and there, asking her about it. In that moment, I decided to reach out to my wife by sending her a text message. I wanted to know if she was available to talk on the phone. Her response was surprising. She claimed she was in an Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, meeting and promised that she would call me as soon as she was finished. This claim raised my suspicions, and I couldn't help but retaliate. I shot back with a question, asking if AA meetings were being held at the location where she was. I also pointed out that her new friend, referred to as Buddy, was now her sponsor. This response seemed to get her attention. In no time, my phone rang, and she called me, but instead of a calm conversation, she began yelling at me, accusing me of stalking her. My frustration boiled over, and I used some strong language that would definitely not be appropriate for most public forums. I made it clear that I had no desire to ever speak with her again. This intense conversation marked a turning point in the last 2 months of our divorce, a time during which she was involved with Buddy. Initially, their relationship was kept under wraps, but as time went on, it became increasingly public. During this difficult period, I made the choice to block both my wife and Buddy on all social media platforms. However, information about their relationship began to trickle in through mutual friends. As they inquired about what was happening, it became clear that my wife was becoming more bold with her online presence, posting status updates and pictures featuring Buddy. Whenever someone reached out to me for clarification, I was always willing to share the truth about the situation. I wanted to preserve the friendships and connections that truly mattered to me, so I felt it was essential to be honest. It turned out that sharing my side of the story resonated with many people. Having the support from friends who acknowledged the pain I was going through made a significant difference. They recognized how horrible her actions had been, and this validation became a comfort to me during a time when I was navigating the emotional turmoil of the divorce. As I spoke with friends and family, it became apparent that many of them had reached out to her for information about Buddy, trying to understand her actions and the new relationship. A common theme emerged from these conversations: she was downplaying the events that had transpired, although she never outright denied her infidelity. This allowed me to provide them with the details she had conveniently left out. Many of our friends, as well as some of her closest relatives, were taken aback by the revelations and, I believe, chose to stand by me during this challenging time. I found myself asking these supportive friends not to confront her directly until the divorce was finalized. As days turned into weeks, her relationship with Buddy became more public, with increasingly bold social media posts showcasing their time together. Meanwhile, my phone continued to buzz with inquiries about their developments. Eventually, I had to request that my friends stop informing me about their activities, as each update brought fresh emotional pain that I wasn't ready to face. Then came Valentine's Day, which was just a few days before our divorce was set to be finalized. On that day, I received 3 screenshots from different friends, all of the same social media post. My wife had shared a picture of herself embraced by Buddy, accompanied by a romantic caption praising how amazing God was for bringing such a wonderful man into her life. She expressed her happiness and even hinted that she hoped he would be the one she would marry someday. This proclamation left me with a mixture of emotions, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the confused comments from her family and distant friends, some of whom were clearly shocked and uncertain about who this new man was. Despite my attempts to convince myself that I wasn't affected by their relationship, deep down, I still felt a profound sense of loss. In addition to that, I experienced a growing sense of disgust and regret. It sickened me to think that I had overlooked the warning signs of her true nature for so long. I also felt a deep disdain for Buddy, whom I viewed as a despicable character for becoming involved with my ex-wife. I didn't want to invest any energy in worrying about him, knowing that karma would eventually catch up with someone like him for being with her. My ex-wife, the person I once thought I knew so well, now felt like a stranger to me. This realization offered some comfort as I tried to move forward with my life. Finally, the day arrived last week when I stepped into court for the proceedings. It marked a significant step toward closure and the beginning of a new chapter. Last week marked a significant moment in my life as the court-appointed date for the official dissolution of my marriage arrived. However, I found myself in a rather fortunate position. I had not been served any legal papers, which meant that my ex-wife had lost her chance to contest anything we had not already included in our previous agreements. These agreements were drafted during a time when we still held on to the hope of reconciling our differences. As a result of this lack of further action from her, I was able to retain my entire 401k, avoid any spousal support, and ensure that no additional debts would be placed in my name. Remarkably, this process unfolded without the involvement of lawyers or court appearances, allowing me to move on from this chapter of my life without needing to interact with her ever again. Once the day concluded, I took a decisive step by blocking her number from my cell phone. The next day, I was pleasantly surprised when 7 of my closest friends organized a divorce party to celebrate this newfound freedom. Among them were 6 friends that we had both shared, and they took to Snapchat to document the festivities throughout the evening. This gathering was truly a celebration worth remembering, so much so that it resulted in my ex-wife receiving a complete social media block from me. Some of my friends even received a few unpleasant messages from her, expressing her discontent. Interestingly, her maid of honor, someone who used to stand by her side, was present at my divorce party and has since chosen to distance herself from my ex altogether. Despite this newfound sense of freedom and the joy of moving forward, I am grappling with one final internal struggle that I hope someone can shed light on. During a period when I was overly fixated on my ex-wife's online activities, I discovered that she had been involved with a man from her hometown while everything was unraveling between us. This individual is not just any man, he is an old flame of hers who, as fate would have it, is married and has a child. This realization has left me torn between 2 conflicting impulses. Should I inform his wife about this affair, or should I keep this information to myself? The thought of potentially breaking up a family weighs heavily on my conscience, leaving me in a state of confusion. So far, I have refrained from taking any action, but the persistent thoughts about whether or not to tell her have caused me considerable anxiety, leading to feelings of nausea and even nightmares. In an update worth sharing, I'm reminded that in just 17 days, it will be the 2nd anniversary of the day that changed everything for me. Reading back through my previous posts, I find it hard to believe that I have managed to come this far, considering the pain and depression I suffered due to my ex-wife's actions. Many have reached out to me, expressing a desire for updates, and I feel compelled to share the latest developments since my divorce became official. For anyone unfamiliar with the backstory, I encourage you to read my earlier posts, which will provide context and reveal the shocking events I've experienced. It has been quite a significant time since my last update, and several noteworthy occurrences have transpired that further illustrate the depths of human behavior. After the divorce was finalized in February 2019, I made a strong effort to maintain distance from my ex-wife, which proved to be more challenging than anticipated. While I did not communicate with her directly, there were moments when I stumbled upon posts from mutual friends or family members of hers whom I had yet to block. My true friends worked hard to keep me shielded from updates, yet some news simply could not be contained. One particularly shocking revelation came in May of 2019 when one of my best friends called to inform me that my ex-wife was planning to remarry. The man she was marrying hailed from Tennessee, and this news took me completely by surprise. As it turned out, my friend's husband had not blocked my ex on Facebook and had seen the announcements leading up to this new chapter in her life. This was all occurring within the span of just a few months after our divorce, specifically between March and July of 2019. It seems that my ex-wife's new relationship did not last long after the wedding. However, the details of how that ended remain unknown to me, although I am not particularly surprised by it. After the announcement in April, a series of social media updates emerged, hinting at the unfolding drama in her life. Beginning in April, a series of status updates on Facebook caught everyone's attention. They contained hints suggesting that everything in life happens for a reason, along with subtle clues that she was experiencing the thrill of falling in love with someone. As time passed, it became clear that she was indeed entwined with a poor soul. Then, in July, something unexpected occurred. She posted a simple picture along with a captivating caption on her Facebook wall. In the image, she stood alongside a man who was unfamiliar to everyone, holding hands in front of a courthouse. Their fingers displayed rings, indicating that they had just gotten married. Gio was tagged in the post and proudly updated her last name, which was now different. The caption read something like, "Excited to start the rest of my life with such an amazing man. Feeling so blessed. Look out, Tennessee, here we come." This sudden announcement left many of us in a dramatic stupor. The entire story, stretching back to my initial post, may seem hard to believe, but I assure you, I am recounting the plain truth. I realize that what follows might be difficult for some to digest, but I hope that if you've read this far, you will trust my account. Curiosity about the situation consumed me. To satisfy my need for answers, I reached out to a cousin-in-law of my ex-wife, someone I had always gotten along with fairly well. Fortunately, he was willing to share the details. Her new husband was someone she had met online, and they had spent months communicating through phone calls and text messages. It appeared that they both fell for each other quite intensely, and in a twist of fate, he proposed to her during one of their phone calls. She accepted, and they were so eager that within just a week of the proposal, she attempted to inform her family and invite them to the wedding. This ceremony occurred in a small, unremarkable town, located about 2 hours from our hometown. For reasons unknown to me, he traveled to California, and they were married on a Saturday. Remarkably, this day also marked the very first time they had met in person. Now, they were officially husband and wife. The most surprising detail, according to the cousin, was that not a single member of her family attended the courthouse wedding. Whether this was due to a lack of time to plan or a lack of respect, it was clear that their marriage was void of any fanfare or ceremony. I couldn't help but think this would have upset her immensely. On the following Sunday, she dedicated her time to packing a moving truck with her belongings, and the couple set off toward Tennessee that Monday. I was in disbelief. I had heard the story from enough people to confirm its truth, yet it was still hard to fathom. I felt a tinge of sympathy for that man. If only he had known the circumstances, he might have chosen to reconsider marrying her in California, a no-fault state where he could potentially find himself in similar circumstances that I had faced. I held on to the hope that he simply lacked the information, rather than being foolish. For a while, I made an effort to push the thought of both of them out of my mind. I found some comfort in the fact that they were moving far away, which meant I would likely never run into her again. The summer of 2019 came and went. However, right in the middle of the fall, another shocking revelation struck. While scrolling through Instagram one day, a video appeared on my screen. It showed my ex-wife holding a plate in front of her father, who was covering his eyes with his hands. Before I could comprehend what was unfolding, I noticed that on the plate was a single cookie adorned with blue frosting. My ex-wife's voice chimed in as she counted down, 3, 2, 1. It's a boy. As her father opened his eyes, it hit me, I was watching a gender reveal video. I was baffled as to why I was seeing this. Her mother had recently created a completely public Instagram account, where she posted this video showcasing her husband's excitement. Apparently, Instagram's algorithm thought I might enjoy this content from someone I may know. At that moment, I completely lost it. Those days that followed were particularly difficult, filled with sleepless nights. The emotions swirling within me were a toxic mix of disgust, pain, frustration, and even a hint of jealousy. Becoming a father has always been one of my greatest dreams, and witnessing this event felt like a cruel twist of fate. Becoming a father is one of my greatest dreams in life. I often think about how different things could have been if life had taken a different turn on our previous path together. This could have been the moment when we would have welcomed a child into our lives. If circumstances had played out differently, I might have already become a father by now, rather than finding myself at this point, contemplating the future of my relationships and family. At 32 years old, I had always envisioned that I would be further along in this journey. Instead, I am still in the early stages, not even on a clear path toward finding a partner, let alone starting a family. Despite these feelings, I recognize that I still have time ahead of me to fulfill this dream. I am a mature man, and I know that with the right person, I can still achieve my goal of fatherhood. However, I cannot help but compare my current situation to the expectations I had set for myself. There are moments when I reflect on how life has turned out, and while I prefer my current place in life over the anxiety of soon-to-be fathers, I still find myself wondering about the timelines we create in our minds. The silver lining in all of this is that more days pass by where I do not think about my past relationship or its complications. I see this as a sign of progress. Of course, there are still challenging days, and the stay-at-home orders have made those dark moments feel even heavier. I am fortunate to work as an independent contractor, allowing me to work from home. Yet, these days can feel remarkably lonely. I try to get outside for walks, but I miss the camaraderie of the gym. Visiting my parents has become a welcome escape, providing me with some much-needed human interaction outside of virtual meetings and phone calls. I recognize that this experience is not unique to me, many people are grappling with similar feelings and situations during these challenging times. It's a collective struggle that we all face. When I find myself feeling hopeful, I often reflect on the days that followed my D-Day, the day my life changed dramatically. I once thought I would never overcome that hardship, yet here I am, finding my way forward, one day at a time. Even when time feels stagnant, it continues to move forward. I appreciate everyone who has taken the time to read my updates and understand my journey. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to those who have reached out, commented, and offered support throughout this life-changing period. The strength and encouragement from this community have been invaluable, helping me avoid a pitiful existence and instead embrace the possibility of a happy life. Here's to another couple of years of surviving and thriving. As I mark 3 years since that pivotal moment in my life and over a year since my last update, I can confidently say that this past year has been one of significant personal growth. For the first time, I have been able to redirect my focus toward myself and my own needs. I have chosen to cut off all communication with my ex-wife and her family. This decision was crucial for me, as being in contact with them would likely have dragged me back into a past I am trying to move beyond. Letting go of those relationships was not easy, especially since I cared deeply for some of her family members and considered them my own. Coming to terms with losing those connections felt unfair and painful, yet it was necessary for my healing. I can see that my decision is paying off. More days pass now without thoughts of her. When I do think of her, it often brings a sense of relief, reminding me that I found my way out of a troubling situation. Over the past year, amidst the pandemic, I made a bold career change and started my own independent business. This shift has added new excitement and purpose to my life, allowing me to focus on what truly matters to me. I made a significant change in my career path when I decided to start my own independent consulting business focused on tech support and IT system design. This move felt like a leap of faith for me, but it quickly proved to be a rewarding decision. Almost immediately, I secured a few contracts, including projects with 2 government organizations in my county. The work has been intense and demanding, but thankfully, both contracts have been renewed for another year, showing no signs of slowing down. Working for myself has given me a sense of freedom that I never experienced before. I no longer have to worry about others depending on my success. My success is entirely in my own hands. This independence has been incredibly refreshing, and I take great pride in the services I provide to my clients. The feelings of self-worth and accomplishment that come from this work have changed how I perceive my past, allowing me to let go of worries about the present and future. My professional life is stable, and I've seen a remarkable improvement in my financial situation, which is better than ever before. I've also noticed positive changes in my mental and physical health. I feel more at ease and have more energy than I did when I started this journey. This newfound confidence has allowed me to see myself in a more positive light. However, there's one issue that's been on my mind: my trust in people, particularly women in a romantic context. My struggles with trust made it easier for me to leave my previous job and start my business. I found comfort in knowing that I only had myself to rely on to accomplish tasks, and I always deliver on that promise. Yet, when it comes to relationships, my desire for companionship has diminished significantly. Being alone has become more comfortable for me. In my brief stint with online dating, I quickly realized that the experience was often disappointing. After a few lackluster dates, it became clear that many women were not genuinely seeking meaningful connections. Instead, they seemed to be looking for attention, often juggling multiple contacts. This realization left me feeling uncomfortable, as I didn't want to be part of that dynamic. I feel like I have already endured enough of that type of situation in my lifetime. It's important to clarify that I don't wish to come off as disrespectful toward women, nor am I choosing to isolate myself completely. In fact, there is a deep part of me that craves connection and intimacy. I long for someone to share my life with. However, I believe it's essential to be cautious and not let just anyone into my life simply to avoid loneliness. I am committed to being patient and focusing on my personal growth while remaining open to the possibility of love again in the future. I often engage in a frustrating internal dialogue that reminds me I am 34 years old and should be at a certain stage in life, perhaps with a spouse and children. It seems that many of my friends are happily living that life, balancing mortgages, vacations, and the joys of parenthood. I find myself questioning my own choices and whether having money is enough to feel satisfied. This is clearly an area I need to work on, and I recognize that adhering to an imagined timeline isn't the right approach for my life. For now, I am grateful for the life I am building. I feel fortunate not to be stuck in a different version of my life, still tied to my ex-wife. I hold on to hope that if I continue prioritizing my own needs and maximizing my days, I will be able to look back and feel proud of who I have become, regardless of the challenges I've faced. I truly appreciate the support, advice, and encouragement I have received along the way. It has been invaluable in helping me navigate this journey.